Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on Community Resilience Estimates, Data and Tools. I'm Crystal Jimerson, a training specialist here at the U.S. Census Bureau, and I want to thank you for joining us today for the Topics, Tools, and Data to Use webinar series. These webinars are a great opportunity for you to learn from our experts about how to access the Census Bureau data, tools, and resources. If you wish to follow along, take a moment now to open an additional browser. You can register for any of the webinars by visiting census.gov/academy. Before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few important housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome written questions during the webinar. Please submit your written questions using the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom center or the right-hand side of your WebEx screen. Please take a moment to locate that now. Once you've found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose all panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your questions. We suggest keeping the chat panel open as we will provide key links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind, you won't be able to respond to the chat. That is for us to send out links and other resources related to the presentation. My colleagues will be monitoring the Q&A panel, and as time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your questions with the presenter to respond to during the webinar. If we do not get to all of the questions with the response during the webinar, we will post the questions and responses with the webinar materials on the census.gov/academy site within 30 business days. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser such as Chrome or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Anthony Knapp. Thanks for being here again. Thank you, Anthony, for being here. You may begin.
Great. Thank you for that, Crystal. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Community Resilience Estimates, Data and Tools. My name is Anthony Knapp, and I'm a statistician in the Small Area Modeling and Development Branch here at the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm also joined today by Benjamin Gurrentz, Chief of the Small Area Modeling and Development Branch, who will be assisting us behind the scenes with the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. Also helping me out behind the scenes is Javier Gomez, one of our section leads, who will be giving the Spanish version of this same webinar on May 22nd. Today's webinar will be covering several questions, such as what is community resilience, why the Census Bureau is measuring resilience and social vulnerability, what are the community resilience estimates, or CRE, what product should I use, and where are these data available? Then I will do a brief overview of our data tools. Finally, we'll spend some time answering some of your questions sent in the chat. So to understand the importance of this effort at the Census Bureau, we should first answer the question, what is community resilience? Community resilience can be defined in many ways, but it is generally refers to the ability of individuals and households within a community to prepare for, absorb the impacts, respond to, and recover from a disaster. Community resilience is defined such that it can be measured from individual and household characteristics. On the Venn diagram on this slide, community resilience is an outcome of two key conditions that can impact communities. These are social vulnerability and capacity. Social vulnerability constitutes various adverse factors that can compound the negative impact of a disaster and that inhibit community resilience. This can be demographic, socioeconomic, or health characteristics for individuals and households in the community. On the other side is capacity, which includes protective factors within the community that promote resilience. This can often be based on characteristics about the community itself, such as economic capital, the presence of institutional support, physical infrastructure, as well as local environmental factors. So why is the Census Bureau measuring community resilience? So this was a relatively recent initiative at the Bureau back in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic spurred public need for usable information about the population. One of the more well-known outcomes during this time was the deployment of the Household Pulse Survey, which collected timely information on the well-being of individuals and households. Also around this time, many groups reached out for more data. There was especially a need among disaster management professionals and community planners for more reliable data to help identify particularly vulnerable communities in the event of a national emergency like the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, there was an overwhelming need for a single, easy to understand metric on community resilience that could also be extended for natural disasters or other localized stressors. Although there was a demand for more data, there were other organizations already publishing numbers on various topics related to community resilience. These numbers are often constructed from publicly available data, particularly the 5-year estimates from the American Community Survey. However, because these are derived from publicly available statistics and estimates, the measures may be limited or suppressed in some cases due to small sample sizes, especially for smaller population groups in the country, as well as smaller levels of geography. In addition, these estimates are often lagged and may be released once every couple years or even longer. In addition, these estimates on community resilience are based on combining aggregate numbers instead of custom tabulations from person-level data sources. The Census Bureau data and methods do have some key advantages here. We have detailed micro-level data from the decennial censuses, as well as our large-scale household surveys, which can be used to design, develop, produce, and release custom products to the public. This enables us to produce estimates and data applications that are more granular, in which case these are annual data points produced down to the neighborhood level, relevant to issues concerning disaster management and community planning. These estimates tend to be more precise, meaning that these use estimation processes designed to reduce variances in our estimates. And finally, these estimates are timely. Our goal is to release these estimates annually using single-year estimates from the most current source data available. Another advantage of the Census Bureau can produce reliable and precise estimates for smaller levels of geography. The chart on the right here shows the hierarchy of various geographic areas used for data products at the Census Bureau. At the national and state levels, these tend to be relatively straightforward to estimate from survey data. However, as we work our way down the hierarchy, things tend to get a little bit more tricky as we run into smaller sample sizes and less precision. We also start to see this especially for certain counties and sub-county geographies such as census tracts. Fortunately for us, the Census Bureau has a long history of using small area estimation, which blends information from multiple data sources to produce reliable estimates for lower levels of geography. Examples include the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates, or SAIPI, and the Small Area Health Insurance Estimates, which are also known as SAHE. A benefit of the small area estimation is it can be adapted for other use cases, such as estimating community resilience down to the census tract level. I wanted to outline some key differences between the estimates that can be produced by the Census Bureau versus those from other data providers. Looking at source data, the Census Bureau can create one-year estimates from the bottom up using individual and household level microdata, while other providers generally have to rely on available aggregate data from publicly available data sources that represent a multi-year period. The Census Bureau releases a single, easy-to-use indicator with population totals and percentages, while other providers release multiple indices or flags broken down by detailed socioeconomic and housing characteristics. Regarding the variances, again, the Census Bureau uses small area estimation to reduce the margins of error, especially for smaller geographies. In many cases, these margins of error can even be smaller than those from the direct survey estimates themselves. For other providers, variances generally are not included, but if they are, they may be based on the published margin of error from the survey. Finally, the release. So the Census Bureau can release new estimates on an annual cycle, while products from other data sources have been released every other year or longer. Next, what are the community resilience estimates? So the Census Bureau's community resilience estimates, also referred to as the CRE, provide a precise, understandable, and easy to use measure of social vulnerability. The CRE defines 10 components to measure social vulnerability. Some examples include poverty, employment, disability, and broadband internet access. And each component is designed so it can be measured from the Census Bureau's American Community Survey for all census tracts in the United States. The American Community Survey, also known as the ACS, is a nationally representative survey with data on the characteristics of the US population. The sample is selected from all counties and county equivalents and has a sample size of about 3 to 3.5 million addresses each year. The survey also covers several topic areas not on the 2020 census, such as education, employment, internet access, and transportation. These components are then used for statistical models to estimate census tract level populations by social vulnerability. The estimates are derived from small area estimation techniques, which are essentially a weighted average between what we call the direct estimates and the indirect estimates. And I'll have a slide later in the webinar just describing this in a little bit more detail. But for now, when I say direct estimates, these are basically estimates that are directly tabulated from the single year ACS restricted use microdata file. And the direct estimates are model-based estimates that use a combination of the single year ACS microdata file, population totals and characteristics from the Census Bureau's own population estimates program, and the 2020 census counts and characteristics from the PL94 redistricting data, and the demographic housing characteristics file, sometimes referred to as the DHC. Okay, so this is an example of how a direct estimate may be calculated from the ACS. Here, we're looking at the ACS survey question number 12 on the form, used for estimating the no vehicle access component. This question specifically asks about vehicle access for the household itself. If a household does not possess an automobile, van, or truck of a certain capacity, then all individuals for this household are flagged with this vulnerability. And then we repeat this process for the other 9 components. Do keep in mind that each component does not necessarily match one specific ACS question like we see here, but might require a combination of questions for individual or households to be flagged as socially vulnerable. Once this is done, we can tally up the population by the number of flag components. So next, individuals are assigned to one of 3 groups based on their level of social vulnerability. Levels here are based on the number of components that were flagged for each person. Low social vulnerability represents the population not in any of these components. The medium group represents the population in 1 or 2 components. And then the population with 3 or more components are considered to have high social vulnerability. So the estimates of social vulnerability directly come from the one-year ACS. As I mentioned before, national state levels, they tend to do okay, but we start to run into smaller sample sizes and larger variances as we drill down to lower levels of geography. So this is where small area estimation comes in, which borrows strength from multiple data sources to improve accuracy and precision. Now, I find this to be a very fascinating topic on its own, but unfortunately, since we're pressed for time here, we won't really spend much time going into detail for today's webinar. But very briefly, the CRE is based off of a composite estimate that is weighted more heavily towards the direct ACS estimate when sample sizes are larger and variances are smaller. On the flip side, the composite estimate would be weighted more towards the indirect estimate for areas where the ACS sample size is smaller and the variances are higher. This method has two important benefits I want to outline. First, it improves precision for smaller geographic areas or numerically small populations. And second, it addresses privacy risks by using modeled estimates rather than individual responses from the survey for those particular areas. Overall, this method tends to reduce coefficients of variation by 20 to 30% for most counties and census tracts, compared to if we were to estimate this directly from the ACS itself. Okay, so here's the US population. We're starting to get into the fun part here where we're actually looking at some data. Here's the US population distributed across the 3 levels of social vulnerability for 2023. Notice how it's not uncommon for individuals to be in none of the components. This is what we call the low social vulnerability group, and it's the second largest group at about 35% of the US population. The largest group is for medium social vulnerability. Again, those are people who got flagged in 1 or 2 components, and they make up almost 45% of the population. And then our smallest group are those in the high social vulnerability group with 3 or more components, and they make up about 20% of the US population. Here are the state population percentages for those with high social vulnerability for 2023. The lighter areas are where high social vulnerability makes it up a smaller share of the state population, while the darker shaded areas are those where they make up a larger share. Now we see more spatial variation as we start to approach the county levels. This is where the CRE becomes especially powerful when you're doing county and even neighborhood level analysis. And for the neighborhood level analysis, I'll demonstrate some of that later when we go over the interactive data tools towards the end of this webinar. So there are a number of benefits of using the CRE. This includes assisting planners with identifying the most socially vulnerable populations for the distribution of resources in the event of a disaster. The estimates are also the timeliest, most statistically precise, and granular measure of vulnerability. And they use small area methodologies mentioned before with a proven track record for other programs at the Census Bureau. Also, given the relatively recent nature of the CRE program, we absolutely are open to discussions about updating future data products to better meet our users' needs. Another benefit is the flexibility in how data can be analyzed and interpreted. And partners can work with the Census Bureau to adjust components of social vulnerability as needed. Okay, so this next section covers the various CRE data products that you might use. So a number of CRE products have been released since 2020. These include the standard CRE, the CRE ranking tables, CRE for Puerto Rico, and CRE for HEAT. The standard CRE provides an easily understood metric of social vulnerability for the United States. In this case, for the 50 US states plus the District of Columbia and their containing counties and census tracts. This product releases levels of social vulnerability for the nation, counties, and all census tracts. And this also includes FEMA data from the National Risk Index, which rates a community's expected economic loss by type of natural disaster. The standard CRE is released annually, with the most recent release being the 2023 estimates that were published online just this past January. The next product is the ranking tables, which were released the same time as the standard CRE. These are percentile-based rankings with margins of error for areas most socially vulnerable to certain types of natural hazards. These hazards include earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, strong winds, wildfires, and severe winter weather as defined by FEMA. The tables list the top 25 counties and the top 100 census tracts by type of natural hazard. The tables themselves will include the rankings, their percentiles, the population totals and percentages for the high social vulnerability group, as well as the FEMA risk ratings. Our next product is the CRE for Puerto Rico, which expands on the standard CRE to include estimates for Puerto Rican geography. This includes the one-year estimates from the Puerto Rico Community Survey and uses a similar small area estimation method as the standard CRE. Now, there are slight methodological differences between the Puerto Rico and standard CRE, but the methods are similar enough that users may make comparisons between the Puerto Rico and standard estimates. Now, these estimates measure social vulnerability to disasters at the Commonwealth, Municipio, and all census tracts within Puerto Rico. And this is also an annual release, with the 2023 estimates scheduled to be published later this month. Next is the CRE for heat. This is an experimental product that was just released last year that measures social vulnerability in the context of extreme heat events around the United States. This estimate was developed in collaboration with Arizona State University's Knowledge Exchange for Resilience. And this is different from the standard CRE since some of the components of social vulnerability have been revised or updated to focus more on heat exposure. Examples include information about housing quality or the type of housing that people might be living in, as well as modeled estimates on the potential lack of air conditioning within living quarters. Okay, so there are a number of places to download or view the CRE data. The main place at the top of the list here is the Census Bureau website, where you can find everything for the CRE from data sets, technical documentation, and frequently asked questions. The second item is where you can find CRE data on the main data hub called data.census.gov. If you do use data.census.gov, just type CRE in the main search field. That will pull up the tables you will need. For our particularly savvy data users who prefer to use code to download and extract data, they can use the Census Bureau's application programming interface, also known as the API, which is that third link there. And then finally, we have several data tool applications that will allow you to explore the CRE data. Okay, looks like this is the point where I will demonstrate 3 data tools currently available on our program's website. And just give me a couple seconds to switch over to the web browser here. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the main census web page. So you can reach our program page if you happen to bookmark or have the direct link. If not, I'll just show you very quickly how to get to our page from census.gov. So at the top of the screen, just hover your cursor over surveys and programs, click on surveys and programs. And then on the next page, it gives you a very long list of all the surveys and programs run by the Census Bureau. My recommendation is just use this drop-down menu under Demographic Survey Program. And we're towards the top of the list here, so you can just click Community Resilience Estimates. And then that will bring up the result for our page. Okay, wonderful. The web page is working especially quickly today, so I'm liking it. Okay, so this is our main landing page for the CRE. If I scroll down, you'll see a list of the main data products that I just covered, as well as our 3 data tools. So the first one is the CRE Interactive Tool. It's also known as the CRE Viewer. The second one is the CRE for Puerto Rico Viewer. And then at the bottom of the page is the Community Resilience Estimates ranking tables. Another way to go directly to our list of viewers and data tools, you can also just click on the data link over here on the left, and then just click on the top link here, Community Resilience Estimates, Data Tools and Apps. And here's the list of our 3 tools with brief descriptions on exactly what they display. So I already have the first tool loaded here. So this is the CRE Viewer. So this displays the standard CRE estimates for 2023. So you can see it's an interactive map viewer that defaults to the state level. Currently, it shows the state percentages for our high social vulnerability group or the 3 or more component group. The users also have options at the top of the screen to select any of the 3 groups to map. But for now, I'll just leave it here and sort of show you an overview of the user interface for this particular application. So over on the left, there's a section called About This Map, and it has some descriptive text on the estimates, the year of the ACS that was used to produce the estimates. It might be a little difficult to discern, but there is a list of the 10 subcomponents or the 10 components of social vulnerability right here. Some information about the margins of error, what it means, some information about the FEMA National Risk Index. And as I scroll towards the bottom here, there are 4 links that data users can click on if they want to download the data that were used to create this interactive map. I'll also mention, depending on the browser, you might not see a scroll bar. So I definitely recommend you use the scroll wheel or your trackpad to be able to scroll through the text. Below this section is the legend. And again, since the map view is currently pointed to our high social vulnerability group, the legend is set to show the population with 3 or more components. And here are our color ramp and categories. Geographies with a darker shade means that this highly social vulnerable population makes up a larger share. Lighter areas mean they make up a relatively smaller share. Okay, let me pull up some examples. Oh, before I do that, let me just go over the controls here. So if you're familiar with using Google Maps, this should be pretty familiar. So we have some buttons here where you can zoom in, zoom out. You can use your cursor to grab the screen, and you can pan. Let me go up to Alaska, so you can see that we do have data for Alaska as well as Hawaii right here. And then if you click on the home button here, this will snap you back to the default screen. This button right here is a Find My Location button. If your browser is set up to share your current information, it should be able to zero into that location. My browser is not set up with that functionality, so I won't be able to demo that today. This magnifying glass button is the search field. It's quite powerful. Apparently you can search down to the address level, but usually when I use it to search for a particular county or city that I want to zoom into. Now, let's say if you're more interested in the census tracts, this search field will not work for you. You will have to click this second button, which lets you search by the tract geographic ID. The geographic ID is an 11-digit unique identifier for each census tract in the United States and also Puerto Rico. Okay, let me pull up an example here. So right now we're looking at states. I want to see counties, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit until the counties show up. There we go. And let me use San Antonio as an example. So let me click on Bexar County. Okay, so if I click on Bexar County, there's a little pop-up that displays the CRE estimates. So we have the name of the place, the geographic identifier for the county. We can see that these are the community resilience estimates for 2023. And this is the percent with 3 or more components of social vulnerability. So looks like it's about just over 22% plus or minus 2%. There's an additional field right below that indicating whether or not the county estimate is statistically different from the national rate. In this case, it is not. And then it provides a population count of individuals with 3 or more components for the county. And if I scroll down to the bottom, we get the FEMA data. So this is coming from the March 2023 edition of the National Risk Index. And these are our hazard ratings for winter weather, strong wind, hurricane, earthquake, and so forth. So we can see that winter weather, there's a relatively high risk for economic loss for Bexar County. Same thing with riverine flooding. This is a very flood-prone part of the country. Coastal flooding not applicable because this is not a coastal county. Okay, next I'm going to show some census tracts. There's different ways to pull up census tracts. One, I can just keep zooming into the map until they appear. But a neat trick is if you already have the county highlighted, you can click this magnifying glass in the upper left corner of the pop-up, and that'll zoom into the county. And you can see the census tracts. You'll notice, let me zoom back out. So you'll notice that the color changed quite dramatically. So it was sort of this medium shade for Bexar County, but if I zoom in, you see there is a lot of spatial variation going on within this county. The highly socially vulnerable populations are concentrated within the city of San Antonio here, inside this highway loop, as well as south of the city, whereas there's a lower percentage of highly social vulnerable people up in the northern and northeastern suburbs. Okay. I am zooming into downtown San Antonio right here. And let me just click on one of the census tracts. And you just noticed, if you continue to zoom in, you can see more of the street and hydrographic network. Okay, let me click on this tract. So this is the tract that's immediately west of downtown San Antonio. I'm going to click the Zoom to button just to snap it to the center of the screen here. And we can see here that the percent with 3 or more components of social vulnerability, it is almost 64%. By national standards, that's quite high. And we can see that it is statistically significantly different from the national rate. And another interesting thing is, if you look at the FEMA data, it's quite different here compared to the county. Winter weather for Bexar County had a higher rating, but for this inner city census tract, the winter weather risk rating is relatively low. Actually, it's relatively low across several types of natural hazards. Okay, how are we doing for time? Okay, I think I will switch over to the second application here. So this is a CRE viewer for Puerto Rico, and you'll notice that the user interface is exactly the same. It's just this viewer is what you use to pull up the Puerto Rico data. So let's see here. We have the same 3 components or same 3 groups at the top of the screen here. Similar information about this map. Instead of the American Community Survey, it's going to be talking about the Puerto Rico Community Survey. And then the legend. And one thing I forgot to do in the previous data app is show how the legend changes whenever I switch between the three groups. So let me zoom into COGWES. There we go. So right now we're looking at the high social vulnerability group. Let me switch over to zero components. So there's COGWES again for the low social vulnerability group. And then here's the middle group. And you'll notice that whenever I change the group, the color hue changes as well as the legend itself. Let me show the search function real quick. I'll use COGWES again. So COGWES Municipio. Select on the search feature and it will zoom in to that Municipio for you. Similar with Bexar County, with COGWES, you'll notice that there's quite a bit of spatial variation in social vulnerability as you start to zoom in. Okay, and let me go ahead and switch over to the last data tool for today. So this is the Community Resilience Estimates County Rankings Visualization. This is displaying the top most socially vulnerable counties in the United States, broken out by specific natural hazard. By default, oops. Okay. So at the top of the screen here, you'll notice that there's this big eye icon in the center. If you hover your cursor over that, it's just the about this tool description. So it mentions the community resilience estimates, the 10 components of social vulnerability, and other pertinent information about the data that you're seeing. You're also provided with 3 drop-down menus. So the first one, you can select geography. So right now it's the United States. So this list here is just showing you the top counties in the United States that are most socially vulnerable, regardless of any specific natural hazard. Okay, and if I click that drop-down menu, you can change the United States. You can select a particular natural hazard that you want to filter. In addition, let's say if you're from a particular state, you just want to know about the counties in your state, you could just click a state right here. The second drop-down menu, you can change the county rankings a bit. So by default, it's the top 25 counties. You can also specify all counties, or you can do top 25 counties accounting for statistical uncertainty. So let me explain what that is. So the top counties literally is just top 25. Any counties that fall outside the 25th position, they're just not displayed. But we have statistical uncertainty here. So there are statistical ties happening. So if you click this group, it's going to have the top counties as well as additional counties towards the bottom that are statistically tied with any of the counties in the top 25. And then the third drop down is just displays the margin of error on this list. Okay, so with the top list here, it is Kusilvak census area in Alaska. If I hover my cursor over the bar, it'll have some descriptive information. So it looks like almost 62% of the population in this county equivalent is highly socially vulnerable. And you'll notice that there is a little interactive map on the right side. The map view itself is static, meaning you can't pan zoom in and out, but you can interact with the geographies that are being displayed. Let me select a larger county so you can actually see the census tract. So Kusilvak is a relatively small population, so it's one county, only one census tract. But if I select Bronx County, New York, now you can see the census tracts and the spatial variation in highly social vulnerable populations. For Bronx County, you have some descriptive information at the top. So vulnerable population is 42.5%. That's for the entire county. If I hover my cursor over that text, there's some additional information for you. In addition, we have the total county population of over 1.3 million. If I hover my cursor over that piece of text, we have some information about the population as well as the population breakdown for those three social vulnerability groups. Another thing I can do with a map is I can highlight, pick and select a particular census tract I'm interested in. Let's say if I'm a community planner for Bronx and I memorize all the neighborhoods, so I'm able to pull up the tracts by memory. That's something that they can do. In addition to that, you can also filter using the legend down here. So let's say if I just want the highly social vulnerable tracts, the most socially vulnerable tracts. So I can click this top category here and it'll filter out those tracts for me. Okay, one last thing I want to mention with this data visualization. If I scroll down to the bottom, there's these basically arrow buttons. So it lets you kind of go back and forward to different views. It's like a back and forward arrow for a browser, essentially. There's also a button to reset the view. So it just snaps everything back to the default view on startup. Okay. You also have the option to save a copy of a particular view you have open right now. So if I click on this button, you can save it as a PNG formatted image or a PDF or as a PowerPoint slide. And just as an example, this is what the PDF would look like for Bronx County. So that's something that users would be able to keep in their notebook or print out for their own use. Okay. Great. So this concludes the demonstration of the data tools. I encourage you to reach out to our staff outside this webinar as well if you have any questions. But before I end it, I wanted to share a list of success stories from various partners that have worked with our team. So I mentioned the CRE for HEAT, which was a joint partnership between the Census Bureau and the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience at ASU. There was also a recent joint effort between the Census Bureau and Economic Development Administration on creating the Census Poverty Status Viewer. And the team is in continuous communications with National Telecommunications and Information Administration on various products, including the Digital Equity Act Population Viewer, which is another type of map viewer tool, the dashboard tool for the Access Broadband Act, as well as the local estimates of internet adoption. So links to all the resources mentioned in this presentation are included on the slide. And of course, a recording of the presentation will be available to you soon. Thank you. And again, if you need to reach out to us, this is the best way to reach us. So thank you again for your time and attention. And with that, let's head over to the Q&A.
Okay, we have several questions today in the Q&A. First, will CRE be produced for ZCTAs or zip code tabulation areas?
Oh, that's an interesting suggestion. There are no tentative plans to produce resilience estimates for the zip codes. But whoever asked that question, definitely send us an email about that. I'm kind of curious to see what you might want to use that for.
Okay, next question. Can I drill down to specific factors like disability status, for example?
So you won't be able to pull up individual factors or components. So the 10 components are internal inputs used for our processing. The only thing that gets released are those 3 social vulnerability groups. However, our recommendation in the past has been to use especially the 5-year American Community Survey data or the Puerto Rico Community Survey data to identify similar variables like disability or health insurance or what have you, and compare those tract level estimates against the community resilience estimates. That can provide you with some context clues on what might be driving vulnerability for those communities.
Okay, next question. Are there any concerns with comparing CRE for a given geography over time? For example, comparing county level CRE for 2019, 2021, 2022, and 2023?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I think my simplest answer is you can, but be careful because the methodology has changed over time since 2019 and 2020.
Okay, next question. Is there a way in the CRE data viewer to switch the year for which the data are shown?
Right. So the data viewer currently can only display the most current information. So last year it was the 2022 CRE that has been completely overwritten with the 2023 numbers.
Okay. Another question. Are the flags for medium and high CRE based on population? And there's an example, but if you want to start with answering that, you may be able to cover it.
Sure. I'm not too sure if I completely understood the
Okay.
question,
I'm going to read the
but the group,
example if you want me to read
sure.
the example, and that may help. Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, for example, are 2 tracks, one with 10 people and one with 100 people. Could they both be medium or high, even if all 10 people in the first tract are flagged, but on 10% of the second track, but also 10 people are flagged?
Yeah, so the 3 groups, low, medium, and high, depends on how many components that individual got flagged for. So let's say if you have one person in that tract, they somehow got flagged in every single component. Obviously, they'll be in the high category. But if everyone else in the tract, they're in some other category, then only 10% of that tract population would be considered in that extreme category.
Okay. Another question. Give me just a moment. Can this information be correlated with veteran status per household or county?
Yeah, I think that's similar to an earlier question. So veteran status is not one of the core components on social vulnerability that we use for the resilience estimates. So my recommendation to the user is if they are interested in that particular group to rely on the American Community Survey data on that census tract. And they're welcome to merge the public ACS data onto the public available CRE data sets.
Okay. The last question is, can you reshare the email address that's best to reach this team?
Yes, let me just go backwards. So the contact slide is on the screen for people to jot down or take a screenshot of.
Okay, great. That's all for now. I'll turn it back over.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, these are good questions, and again, the questions that I answered today, if it wasn't sufficient or if you had some follow-up, definitely send it to this email. I'm most likely going to be the one who reads this this week, and it's the best way to reach our team. Okay, I think this is the point of the webinar where I hand things back over to Crystal. So let me pull up that slide. Okay, Crystal, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. That was a great informative presentation, and we really do appreciate those walkthroughs. Again, if you would like assistance or more information on our data and our resources, we have an excellent team of data dissemination specialists across the regions where you are available. You can request a training by visiting the Census Academy page at census.gov/academy. And there you will find other resources such as this webinar, recorded webinars, and our data gems. Before we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who played a role in today's webinar. We thank you, our audience, for spending your time with us this afternoon. We are very interested in hearing from you on how we are doing. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation that will appear when you exit the webinar. That brings us to a close. We thank you again for joining us today and hope you have a great afternoon.